What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Scott Proctor alongside my guy Matt Morris per usual. We're back with another episode of Simple Question, but this time we'll have more than one because we got a special guest joining us today. Covers the Memphis Grizzlies for SB Nation, Locked On Grizzlies, Shawn Coleman. Thanks for joining us, my man.
Hey, pleasure to meet y'all. It's always fun to talk to Grizzlies, especially when they're winning like they are. So I appreciate y'all welcome me and thank you guys.
Sure thing. Definitely a great time to talk Grizzlies right now. I want to start here. Obviously, there's a myriad of reasons we can point to for the Grizzlies finishing 38-34 last season, being a first-round exit, to now 41-19 at the All-Star break, having guys like Jay Williams on ESPN picking them to represent the Western Conference in the finals. Tell me what you would point to as kind of the biggest reason for this Grizzlies turnaround in a year's time.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's just everybody. Everybody's a good way of putting it, but, I won't go with that cliche of a thing. It's just a lot of important people just hitting on, either they're reaching what the level people thought they would this year, or they're exceeding it. And I think that that's with everybody. Who knew that Ja Morant was going to jump from, people expecting him to potentially be in the All-Star conversation to where he's clearly a first or second team All-NBA type talent this year? Who knew that Desmond Bane was going to become a top 10 shooter in the league? Who knew that Jaren Jackson Jr. was going to stay healthy and now all of a sudden become a potential NBA Defensive Player of the Year candidate? All those things occurred along with the Grizzlies remaining one of the deepest teams in the league, plus being able to have one of the strongest benches. You've got a team that can play top 10 defense. You've got a team that can feature a top 10 bench. They have a top 10 player leading them. There's a lot of things on this Grizzlies team that unexpectedly are near the top of the league in many categories. Now, many of those things are shining in the regular season, and they lead to regular season success. The question is, can they turn it around as they need to in ways that they're going to have to for them to advance in the playoffs? But a lot of good things happening, but it starts obviously with Ja Morant.
Yeah, and talking about Ja Morant, I mean, this is a guy that is already creating a conversation where we talked about it on the earlier show, the Kevin Durant, Greg Oden thing with him and Zion. It seems like he's a bona fide MVP, candidate right now. What would you say allowed him to kind of take this next step, and how exciting is it to have that type of player in Memphis?
It's very exciting. And the thing that Ja always consistently comes back to is just consistent aggressiveness. He is not going to be denied that mentality, that it factor, that thing that you can't find inside the box scores or in, statistical trends or what have you. He has that every superstar has. He always, and takes pride and joy, always is wanting to do what he can at the best of his ability. And the thing for Ja is he knows that that's always a moving target. There's never a limit to what he can get better at. And so him being told that, hey, his game is going to be really limited if he doesn't have a shot, what does he do? He comes in and has one of the most historical seasons we've ever had from a guard in the paint. He's become a version of himself. We want to compare him to Derrick Rose, Russell Westbrook, what have you, that's fine. But he's literally become a version of himself that you can't really compare to anybody else because you haven't seen it before. And that's Ja being Ja, and he's perfectly fine with that. That's when he is his happiest. So that's what really stands out. And then for the Memphis Grizzlies, to be honest with you, Matt, the other thing that stands out is, listen, it's great to sit here and be talking about this potentially being the best player in Grizzlies franchise history, but this potentially is a legitimate guy the NBA is positioning to be one of their faces of the future. The Grizzlies never thought they would have that. They've never had anything close to that. They didn't know they were going to have that until the draft lottery 2 years ago, and he absolutely has become that before our very eyes. So in multiple ways, Ja has certainly exceeded the expectations of everybody but him.
It's pretty crazy to think about the fact that, like you mentioned, Memphis has really never had a superstar the caliber, just a box office player that Ja Morant is. I want to talk about somebody else you mentioned. Quick story for you, Shawn. My first job out of college was as a local prep sports reporter in Richmond, Indiana, the hometown of Desmond Bane. Me and Des spoke on the phone multiple times while he was at TCU and leading up to the 2020 NBA draft. I said then when he was drafted number 30 overall that he was a steal of that draft. Do you agree with me? And just tell the people how important Des is to this team's success and how he's been able to take a leap from year one to year two.
Oh, absolutely. And you can probably back this up, Scott. Very humble, very grounded, very
100%.
kind individual who works hard. Des is special. As a person and as a player, he is absolutely special. Something that automatically stood out to me when I was studying him for the 2020 draft, talking about, his potential fit with the Grizzlies, was just the automatic repetition of his shot. It is so just eye-opening and really, really pretty, for lack of a better way of putting it, to see how quickly he can reload and repeat that shot process. But you get into the person, you get into the hard worker, you get into the person that is going to he doesn't need extra motivation, but he got more than he needed on draft night to consistently exceed what people expected of him. He's not just a top 10 shooter in the league. He's one of the best rising stars out there. And there's another player who's coming back for the Grizzlies by the name of Dillon Brooks, who was basically the soul of this team, added the swagger to this team. Desmond Bane has had Dillon Brooks roll off onto him a bit because he's the guy who's defining our swagger. You see him talking up some of the bigger names in the NBA, but he's backing it up. And the other thing that stands out, Scott, is that when you look out west, you've got Chris Paul, Devin Booker, you've got Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, you've got Steph Curry, Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson.
Backcourt.
Yep.
Exactly. And that's exactly what Ja Morant and Desmond Bane are becoming and what they're going to need to be in today's NBA. And they complement each other so well with Ja in the paint and Des shooting the three on the outside.
No doubt.
Yeah, and Shawn, you talk about backcourts. You mentioned Jaren Jackson Jr. Also, I love Steven Adams on this team. I think that he's been quietly one of the bigger pieces. Great addition after you guys trade Jonas Valanciunas away. How important is that front court when you're going to go up against a team like possibly Denver, where you have the Joker, or you have Rudy Gobert. And I know Phoenix rebuffed their front court as well to try and deal with what happened to them in the finals.
Great points, Matt. And the thing that I'll say is this: it's nice to have it on a couple of different ends. One of the reasons why it's nice to have that is because Steven Adams could add quality without needing a bunch of quantity when it comes to plan touches and things like that. He creates his value by grabbing those offensive rebounds. And that's how the Grizzlies are overcome the fact that they're not that good of a three-point shooting team right now. They're getting those extra 2-point possessions, and they're just out activitying everybody. That's a word that I just created, so you're welcome for your show. But all joking aside, it's the activity that's creating the extra quantity. They're getting significantly more shots per game, especially of the 2-point variety, because of how well they're doing offensive rebounds. That's Steven Adams. He also does a great job of, though he doesn't shoot the three that much, he doesn't create offense that much, his passing has not only become significantly more valuable for him than it was previously, but it was also the fact that he's become one of the better passing big men in the league. And then when you put him up against Joker and that lets Jaren do what he does on defense all over the place, that really does help. So the combination between Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson Jr., plus him adding value without having to touch the ball that much, it really adds an underlying level of support that's quite valuable for Memphis.
No doubt about that. Shawn, you got ahead of another question I had for you when you mentioned Dillon Brooks. He's only played in about 20 games this season, but he's reportedly set to return from that ankle injury sometime in March. What does he bring to this squad, and how do you envision his return kind of altering things for this team?
Oh, it's the confidence, the swagger, just the overall consistency of being that source of confidence. And not that this team needs anymore. There's been plenty of national stories written about how the Grizzlies, talk a lot of trash, but they back it up. And that's why they talk it. That's how they like to play. But getting Dillon Brooks back, Scott, really helps something now. It gives us a dynamic duo on both ends of the court. We've talked about Bane and Ja being one of the best backcourts in the league, leading our offense. Now, name me many defensive combinations that are better than Dillon Brooks on the outside with Jaren Jackson Jr. in the post. Yeah. It's hard to name them. And we've already seen proof that when they play together, the Grizzlies have the ability to play like a top 5 defense. Overall, Dillon, Desmond, Ja, and Jaren have played less than 100 minutes so far this season. We're hoping to get him back early March. We're hoping to get him at least a month under his wing to be able to play with the rest of our, young core. And then from there, him being that defensive presence against the other team's best scorer, plus getting into probably a smaller offensive role, but one where he can become a shooting specialist, which he's shown the ability to do. He could be a great addition on both ends.
Now, Shawn, you talk about confidence a lot, and one thing that you already mentioned was it's the regular season. And I know that in the NBA, it almost comes as a but, like, yeah, everybody's doing great in the but it's the regular season. their big games against Golden State, against even the Lakers, and not being afraid of LeBron, does that give you guys in Memphis a lot of confidence that when it does become serious time, it comes postseason, they're not going to shy away from it or show some of those hiccups that young teams may face?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the fact that this team has consistently taken on the best teams in the NBA, having beat Golden State, Utah, Phoenix, Brooklyn. You know, you had Ja and Desmond outperforming Kevin Durant and James Harden a week after they had outperformed Chris Paul and Devin Booker both times on the road. That confidence is absolutely there. That confidence is one of the strengths of this team, that they are so confident within themselves. They don't care what expectations people have for them. They don't have expectations for themselves, and that's what they play like, and that's why they keep exceeding expectations everywhere. But Matt, the confidence is not the question at all. It's the fact that against teams that may have more experience, may be a bit deeper with higher quality talent, will the Grizzlies be able to make the needed adjustments in the playoffs once those other teams make their adjustments? Once they try to take away the paint, once they try to take away Ja, will we be able to shoot the three, pass the basketball, defend the three, play half-court offense? Those are the questions that come into play. The Grizzlies are fully confident they'll be able to do that. Will the consistency follow that confidence to be able to win a playoff series or more this season?
Shawn, I got a two-piece for you, and then we'll let you get up out of here, man. The first part is this. Obviously, we're talking about the playoffs now. Is there a matchup? It looks like the Grizzlies are going to at least slide in those top 4 seeds out west. Is there a matchup you think the Grizzlies would want to avoid if they can? Like, what do you envision as kind of a worst-case scenario matchup first round for the Grizzlies? And that's the first part. The second part, ultimately, what do you see as this team ceiling this season, postseason-wise?
I honestly think, Scott, the Grizzlies probably are ready to take on anyone and everyone. I'm going to be honest with you. And to be honest with you, when you look at matchups, one of their tougher matchups is the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team that in many ways is similar to the Grizzlies, but put so much pressure on teams shooting the three that the Grizzlies have a hard time beating them if they're making their three. So Minnesota actually is a dark horse answer to your question. I think that out of the realistic options, you're probably looking at Denver being the team. I know we're 3-0 against them this year, but it's taken us playing uncharacteristically good basketball in certain areas to beat them. I think we could do that, but if they get Michael Porter Jr. back, if they get Jamal Murray back, even if they're just shells of themselves, then they're a very dangerous team. So, of the three of Dallas, Denver, Minnesota, I'd probably rank it Minnesota, Dallas, Denver from who I would want to face versus who I would not. If the LA teams are options, if we get up to that 2 seed, one of those are in the 7th seed, and they're missing out, they're without one of their big stars, perhaps they become the favorable. So to answer your question, there's not really a specific answer. I think the Grizzlies are just ready to face anyone and everyone, and I think that they have the confidence again to be able to do what they need to do to get the job done. Now, what does that look like? I think right now, realistically, it probably is a hard-fought second-round exit, especially if Chris Paul comes back just fine. I think the Grizzlies likely are going to be a big underdog against both the Suns and the Warriors, whomever they meet in that second round. I think they could beat them, but it's going to take them consistently doing things that they have not been the best at doing during the regular season. And Matt, that's back to where I'm talking about what they're going to have to do to have success in the playoffs. But for right now, I think that it's a hard-fought second-round exit is a perfect way for them to end this season. And I'll leave you with this. I know that that's going to be talked about a lot. I know that the Grizzlies' playoff success, there may be a lot put on that, and that's fine. But I'm going to say, if anybody wants to bring up their season being a disappointment or what have you, because of wherever the playoffs end, that's fine. I'm going to counter with the fact, name me another team that's going to have a potential all-defensive player, an all-NBA first or second teamer, and one of the 10 best shooters in the league. Name me another team after this season that's going to have all 3 of those members on its team that are 24 years or younger going into next season. That's the most exciting part.
The age part is certainly the most exciting part about all of that excitement, and the future is certainly bright for the Grizzlies. But that's going to do it for us, Shawn. We appreciate you so much for joining us. This was awesome. Go follow Shawn on Twitter. Check out the Locked On Memphis Grizzlies podcast. But that's going to do it for us. For Scott Proctor, Matt Morris, Shawn Coleman. We'll catch you next time.